in other states. Perhaps you feel you're constantly reacting instead of leading your firm through these events. The pressure only intensifies when new business opportunities arise, since firms need to be in good standing to bid on new projects. You are not alone, and we're here to share our expertise in maintaining multi state compliance. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. First, because we have a large number of attendees today, the audience will be muted. Second, the presentation is eligible for continuing education credits through Earmark. I will explain how to claim your CE credit at the end of this presentation. I'm Jared Morgan. I'm an account executive here at Harper Compliance. My experience spans from corporate and AEC industry specific licensing. On your screen, you will see my contact information. I encourage you to take the information down. And if there's any questions that come up today, tomorrow, a week from now, feel free to email me. I'll also play this slide at the end of the webinar. Moving on, a little bit about Harper Compliance. We are experts in the architecture, engineering, and contractor licensing. Since 2012, we've helped over 40,000 clients navigate regulatory requirements within the AEC industry specifically. We've helped over 8,700 firms apply for, secure, and maintain licensing, entity registration, and tax compliance. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump on in. Today, we will talk about the benefits of compliance and how it supports your firm's strategy, what to expect when licensing for AEC firms, key issues that arise when expanding into new jurisdictions, a comprehensive management solution that helps firms comply with regulations and mitigate risk, and how to proactively approach positions firms to compete more effectively. We all know that licensing is required by law. That is obvious, but have you considered the ways in which a well-run licensing and business compliance function can be an asset to your firm? Being able to secure new licenses quickly enables you to capture growth opportunities in other jurisdictions or disciplines. It ensures the firm can pursue new business, meet the timelines, and gain an edge over the competitors that haven't been as proactive. A comprehensive compliance program, which includes confidence and peace of mind for your organization that it's fully compliant. Maintaining your licenses without any lapses or gaps reduces legal, financial, and operational risk safeguards for your firm's reputation. Staying in good standing upholds professional standards of architect, engineers, and contractors. It gives visibility and clarity to the status for each registration and license for your organization. It saves your business time and money by enabling efficient operations and communication. And it ensures continuity through business changes and staff turnover. A proactive approach means firms can take advantage of these benefits. We will talk today about how to create a program that enables you to achieve all of this. These are a few licensing challenges AEC firms face. We will cover in depth in the coming slides, but beginning with the navigation of complex licensing requirements to secure professional licenses for both the individual professional and the firm itself. We will discuss the importance of managing licensed qualifiers, otherwise known as qualifying engineers or responsible parties, and their continuing education requirements. Then we will discuss how licensing becomes more complex as you expand into new states. There are considerations around the business entity's name, structure, and ownership which are closely intertwined with licensing requirements, particularly the qualifying engineer in that new state. We will discuss the requirements for licensing renewals, including the need to maintain good standing and how to stay ahead of regulatory changes. This is a high-level view of the first challenge we'll cover, which is managing the process of applying for professional licensure for the first time in a new industry. There's in fact over 800 state and local licensing requirements across the United States. Firms need a system to research and fully understand the varying requirements for each license type in each state and local jurisdiction. Each may have a business and licensing regulations, with certain prerequisites involving firm licenses, individual qualifier licenses, and entity registration. It is important to understand the order in which license applications and supporting documents must be submitted. This is the perfect time to mention that our brand new Compliance Navigator tool, which you'll get a chance to test out at the end, um, it's completely reinvents the old school process of manual state by state regulatory research. I will show that again at the end. First, securing that new license. Once you've determined the specific requirements apply to your business, you've got to gather all the information and documentation used in completing the application filing. That includes keeping up with the continuing education, surety bonds, and insurance requirements, and also financial statements. As you can see to the right, the list of potential requirements is long and varied. Licensing authorities commonly require proof of Secretary of State and Department of Revenue good standing during the initial and renewal application process. Many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that businesses maintain internal records and follow certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not be reported on a license application, but most agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Firms need to fully understand the order of the structure, naming, and ownership requirements before attempting to register or pursue licensure. Why? Because the order of operations between state agencies varies greatly. In some states, like New York, an engineer firm actually has to begin the process of licensure with the state education department before it registers the entity with the Department of State. But in others, like South Carolina, the entity registration happens before the firm applies for its license. In most states, at least one individual, known as that qualifier, must first have their individual professional license. Which brings us to the next challenge, managing those qualifiers. As you probably know, a qualifier is a licensed individual designated on your firm's license as being responsible for the firm's work in that state. In most states, at least one individual, known as the qualifier or responsible party, must first have their individual professional license before the firm can apply for their license. Without a licensed qualifier in most states, the firm's license application will be denied, and they will not be eligible to do business in that state. Managing qualifiers is critical for businesses, as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. For that reason, you might come across a synonymous term, the responsible party. Professional engineers and architects are the foundation of the certificate of authorization. It is vital to maintain them and track their CEUs in order to protect your firm's stability, reputation, and also the right to practice. 13 states have determined that the engineer in responsible charge must be full-time employee of the firm, defined as 60% of working hours in Virginia, 30 hours per week in Ohio and Tennessee, and the majority of time working hours in North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. Indicative of their importance in this quote from Illinois is that the design firm will be inoperable for all professions if the license of even one managing agent becomes inactive or not renewed. Since nearly every licensing board asks about legal and action occurring in other states, the damage can spread across all of your businesses and range from financial to reputational and everything in between. Let's discuss the best practices for managing those qualifiers, as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. In most states, without that license qualifier, the firm's initial license application will be denied. Also, any changes in the qualifier's information or a change in the qualifier altogether must be reported within a short period of time. That is usually within 30 days, sometimes within as few as 10. Now we know the changes and qualifiers can happen for many reasons, such as an individual moving home address. It can also happen for more significant reasons, such as an individual leaving the firm through retirement, resignation, or hitting the lottery. Whether these changes are sudden or expected, firm management needs to be ready to update state licensing boards. If an existing qualifier leaves and no one holds the proper state license, someone from your team is going to have to sit in for the exam. I can think of at least one recent client situation where the new qualifier had to fly to the state in question to take the exam in person and order that became licensed in order to become licensed in time. If the firm does not report the change, states can and have assessed severe penalties for operating without a designated qualifier, up to denial of the firm's right to practice. This is why managing qualifiers is mission critical for the firm. Here's what you can do to meet this challenge proactively. One, knowing which qualifier or qualifiers will be designated for each business entity in each state. Many states issue licenses to specific areas of specialty, such as structural versus mechanical for engineers and residential versus commercial for contractors. Firms that practice in multiple states need to know the license for each. When attempting to register in a new state, this means any qualifiers generally must be licensed in advance. Firms must be proactive. No one wants to miss a key opportunity because a qualifier was not licensed in time. Next, let's ask your team, do you know who your firms or your clients' qualifiers are currently? Which states and entities are acting in that capacity? If the person leaves the firm tomorrow, who could fill the role within just a few weeks or even days? Answering those questions will identify any gaps you need to address. Lapsed licenses may incur penalties to reinstate, but it's better to tackle these types of issues head on. Once your licenses are in order, work to identify individuals who could step in as a replacement qualifier. Firms should work towards having a contingency plan, especially in your key jurisdictions. You must consider the state processing times as well. You'll recall that licensure involves multiple agencies. Many licensing boards have only a handful of staff or meet on an irregular basis, such as monthly. Expediting an application simply may not be possible regardless of who handles their submission. The state of New York, for example, can take upwards of 4+ months to approve the formation of the design professional corporation, and that's assuming that everything was submitted in exact accordance with the state's rigorous standards. As a result, management must take a significantly longer approach to the license compliance because integral firms' ability to pursue out of state opportunities as well as maintain the right to practice on an ongoing basis. It is simply not possible to react and attempt to pursue licensure in the response to an opportunity. Most times, that opportunity is already going to be passed. Finally, much like managing firm licenses, firms need to invest in a way to manage their qualifiers and track their continuing education certification. An ideal solution includes software to track qualifier information across states, giving management immediate visibility into who is licensed where, and producing an actionable list of tasks whenever a departure occurs or is about to happen. Challenge two, moving into new states. When a firm wants to expand into other states, they're required to register to do business in each state called foreign qualification. Today, many businesses are seeing a need to foreign qualify in one or more states. A highly relevant example that became more prevalent during the pandemic is needing to foreign qualify due to a remote arrangement where an existing employee is now working from home outside the company's domicile or physical state. There are plenty of other reasons why a business would need to expand, whether it's planning to submit proposals, open a branch office, or simply have regular commercial activity or a physical presence of some kind. If you want to look up specific transactions in any state, I encourage you to use the link on your screen to check out the Foreign Qualification Ultimate Guide. To foreign qualify in any new state, the business is faced with prospect of ensuring its name is available for use, then identifying a reliable registered agent in that state, and filing the appropriate forms with all of the appropriate state agencies, Secretary of State, Department of Revenue, and licensing boards, all before beginning to transact business. Let's launch a poll here about expanding into new states. Does your firm need or plan to register in additional states within the next 6 months? A lot of us expanding. Wow, awesome to see. Great to hear your businesses are expanding. Congratulations. And say 80% of us, 85% of us are expanding to new states. Great to see. There are variations to each state's requirements to register for foreign qualification. So it is important to research each state's requirements and understand the process and order of operations between those state agencies when registering the business in another state. Overall, most states require the qualifier to have their individual license first and proof that firm is in good standing in its current domicile state. It must identify a reliable registered agent in that state and file the appropriate forms, all before beginning to do business. To submit the Certificate of Authority application, proof of good standing by the firm in their current domicile state is often required, and the COA approval is usually required for the licensing application to be reviewed and approved. Preparing the licensing application involves confirming availability and clearance of the legal name. For example, for ABC Engineering, it may require a letter from the licensing board showing that the word engineering can be used in that name. There are multiple agencies involved in the foreign qualification application and licensing processes. Typically, the licensing agency, such as the Board of Engineering or Architecture, will provide more specific information for firms that the Secretary of State will, especially regarding ownership structure and naming requirements. Multiple calls to each agency to verify information may be required. And this can create some logistical difficulty between identifying the need to register and the time it takes to state to approve the application. If you're not careful, there can be penalties for late registration, as well as potential delays in starting business transactions in the new state. You can see why dedicated research and preparation are needed before entering any new state. Failure to do so will result in rejected licenses and business entity registrations. It'll cost you amendment fees and delays in the ability to start working in that new state. Now, imagine going through this process across several states, and you can see how critical multi state registration can be. Businesses should examine the current and planned activities out of state, assesses whether foreign qualification and additional registrations will apply, and then work to secure those. Let's dive on in here to the business naming and structure in more detail. When registering for foreign qualification, the business must ensure its name is available for use or a variation of that name. You're probably familiar with certain professional entity types, which allows a given company to practice in a regulated profession. Examples include a professional corporation, professional association, or professional limited liability company. Professional entities are registered and named at the state level, and requirements also differ from state to state. Take, for example, South Carolina Engineering Firm. In South Carolina, there's no professional limited liability company entity type. Thus, the engineering firm is organized as a traditional LLC. However, if that firm wishes to operate and obtain licensure in North Carolina, a traditional LLC will not be approved by the Secretary of State or the licensing board, because in North Carolina, they require that professional limited liability company, or the abbreviation PLLC, must be included in the name. This leaves the firm with the two entities across two states to maintain, operating under two names too. In addition, many states have distinct entity name requirements. For AE firms, most states, only companies that are authorized to practice architecture or engineering are able to use those and related terms in their legal names. For firms formed in states that don't require one of those words, they can expect the need for an assumed name in that new foreign state that includes that term in order to comply. And the forced assumed name must be used in the state on everything from tax accounts, firm licenses, and even contracts and invoices. For example, in Idaho and Alabama, the firm must have an engineer on staff and in good standing before they can use the word engineer in that name. In different twist on the requirement, we have a client who wasn't an engineering firm, but wants to use the name engineering in their name, and it was denied. Another naming challenge for the business may come into play during a rebranding initiative, too. The same process of checking availability applies before the new name can be recorded and used. And if the business registers in multiple states, this is a state by state exercise. Then there are two ownership requirements. States want the principals of AEC firms operating in their new states to be licensed, hence qualified to run the practice. This is basic consumer protection, but states have varying ownership thresholds. Take our South Carolina engineering firm example. If it wishes to foreign qualify in New York State, it must demonstrate that 100% of the company's ownerships or shares are owned by a professional licensed in New York. For many firms, that's just not possible. Either select individuals aren't specifically licensed in New York, or they are not engineers at all because their home state doesn't mandate it. The only other option for them is for our South Carolina firm to consider the entity called Design Professional Corporation. For that entity, New York State sets the bar at 75.01% of the owners needing to be licensed, along with a host of their other considerations. Firms may quickly discover the need for several entities, each with different ownership structures, to comply with each state where they operate. How to name and structure the ownership of a new entity will take you time and sometimes major considerations by management. It's essential to understand the process of getting the firm properly registered in those states. While these requirements and hurdles have always existed, many AEC firms are facing broader exposure in the rush to bid on projects from the recent infrastructure bill and rebounding construction markets. It's imperative to be ready to clear regulatory hurdles in the state in order to win. As a result, management must take a significantly longer term view with respect to licensing. I also do want to point out that firms should consult with their legal, tax, and accounting professionals. These parties are there to advise the businesses on their specific requirements as well as on any tax or legal liability. We have an example of this to share. Recently, a colleague spoke to a CFO of a fast growing Maryland firm. They had an employee starting in the state of New York in 1 month. She thought that was plenty of time, saying she turned the attention to registration during the week of the employee starting. Now we go back to what we discussed. In New York, foreign registrations with the Department of State can take several weeks on its own. To set up the domestic design for profit corporation, it can take months. Coupled with the time that it takes the Department of Taxation and Finance to process tax registration applications, you can conservatively add 3 weeks to another month. This means the best time to get started without incurring additional expedited fees would have been a minimum of 16 weeks before that employee's start date, if not several months before. Any additional delay jeopardizes the firm's ability to onboard and pay that individual employee. Firms everywhere are running into this same issue, setting up in a new state, from determining whether or not the entity has nexus and even needs to register. The process of filing and securing the various registrations and accounts across agency is going to take time. Firms everywhere have these out of state registrations. It's not practical to wait until you have an employee ready to start. It's not efficient to repeat the scramble in each new state. Management and especially HR and legal teams needs to be in lockstep, reviewing the hiring pipeline and ensuring registrations are in order as soon as it becomes feasible. As a result, just like the process of registering the entity, it's important to examine your firm's unique tax requirements up front, understand the order of operations, and work proactively to secure the necessary accounts. Remember, because state requirements and your firm's specific nexus change, it's important to repeat on a regular basis. And we recommend doing so in collaborating with the CPA or other tax or accounting professional. By doing all of this, the firm monitors where state requirements potentially apply and can be ready to register when it becomes necessary. Here's a summary of best practices for researching, planning, and applying for expanding into those new states and doing foreign qualifications. A holistic approach is needed, which involves comprehensive research, understanding the order of operations, consulting with legal, tax, and accounting professionals, having internal discussions and making decisions about the entity name, structure, and ownership. It may need to take place first. Identifying your qualifiers, beware of logistic difficulties that can result in delays and thus penalties, and then managing the applications and filing fees across multiple agencies to their various deadlines. Moving on. Let's turn our attention to the another aspect of compliance, which is tax registration. In the vast majority of states and for most tax accounts, action by the business is required in the form of tax registration applications, whereas business entity registration takes place with the Secretary of State and licensing is handled by the licensing boards. Tax registrations is distinctly separate process. It takes place with the Department of Revenue. Businesses have the obligation of determining their tax liability and then registering to operate and open tax accounts. Only in limited cases are tax accounts opened automatically, such as franchise tax in California or Texas. To the right, you'll see a list of common tax types in a business that may need to register in a new state. There may be multiple agencies that are involved in tax registrations, each with its own process and applications. Firms need to plan ahead for lengthy processing times, about 3 to 6 months or longer. And once registered, these accounts are then required to file returns and pay taxes. We have a lot to cover in today's presentation. We will avoid doing a deep examination of those specific registration applications. However, for those who aren't familiar with tax registration process, just know that these applications require a highly detailed information on the company, its ownership, and planned taxable activity. Managing renewals, which becomes challenge number three. It's an entity registration maintenance is just the appetizer. That has to be done before even getting started on the license management. Once a license is in a given jurisdiction, the firm will have license ID numbers, registration dates, and renewal deadlines, and continuously changing requirements to navigate. With over 1,500 AEC filings, keeping up with changes to requirements can be time consuming. And as the firm grows and becomes licensed in multiple jurisdictions or specialties, the complexity increases. Along with the license application itself, there is other documentation needed, like keeping up with continuing education, surety bonds, and insurance requirements and financial statements. Many of these required with the initial licensing application, and they need to be maintained and reported to the licensing agencies. Licensing renewal applications usually require proof of good standing for the Secretary of State as well. Renewing licenses on time can take more effort than you would expect, as many agencies require maintenance filings anytime there is a change to a company name, ownership, contact information, or operating activity. As mentioned earlier, many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that businesses maintains internal records and follow certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not need to be reported on a license renewal application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Many firms expect their individual engineers to manage their own continuing education and license renewals. The firm loses a key level of oversight and faces increased risk by keeping individual license management at arm's length. As well as we'll touch on later, even a single lapsed individual license from a qualifier engineer can have a major consequence. Whether or not a firm has the administrative capability to directly handle individual licenses, it should invest in a solution that, at a minimum, gives management direct insight into the status of practitioners in any state at any given time. Most companies use spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders. It's going to run a risk of critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. You need to develop a system to manage all aspects to maintaining and renewing multiple licenses. Challenge four, monitoring those changes of requirements. As firms grow and operate across more states, one of the biggest challenges becomes keeping up with the changing regulatory requirements. Across the country, there's more than 800 AEC license types, over 1,500 different license filings, and thousands of filing authorities at the state and local level. On top of that, every state has its own continuing education and professional development rules. The key isn't just knowing today's requirements, it's staying current as those requirements evolve. The best practice is to review your requirements at least once a year and build any changes directly into your licensing and record keeping process. That way, new rules don't become last minute surprises. It's also important to allow enough time to complete new applications or filings when requirements change. When firms plan ahead, they protect their ability to operate, avoid unnecessary disruption, and stay in good standing wherever they do business. Monitoring changes to requirements isn't just about avoiding problems, it's about creating a system that supports your long term stability and growth. Here's a summary of our best practices: securing new licenses, making sure we're managing our qualifiers, expanding into new states, maintaining renewals and keeping in good standing, and then monitoring changes to requirements. Firms that now operate in multiple states may need to repeat these processes in every single state wherever required. To address this, management should start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle research, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing non core components of the process to specialized providers. Relying on spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders runs that risk of the critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure those new businesses. Firms need to consider their business compliance and professional licensing management as a system. This will reduce risk of items slipping through the cracks and firms falling out of good standing. The system needs to provide a full visibility and encompass all licensing stakeholders and their activities, including those individual engineers, operations and administrative leads, who's going to be managing those day-to-day systems, human resources handling the hiring and onboarding, and often also tracking CE credits, the legal counsel and financial administrators coordinating the certificate of authorities and other compliance needs, and even the marketing and business development teams who needs to know, are we registered to do business in this state for any proposals that are under consideration. Let's drop a poll here for license management. How is your firm currently managing professional licenses? Are you using spreadsheets? Do you have your own system, a third party, or are you using an attorney? Seeing a little bit of every answer, but most I'm seeing is spreadsheets. That is our most common thing we see here at Harbor Compliance. The best way or a dream state to manage compliance starts with a proactive and comprehensive system for complying. It involves a top down strategy as well as the right people, process, and technology to execute. To address this, management should start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle research, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing non core components of the process to specialized providers. On your screen, some components of what a system might include, which we'll dive into here. on the last segment of today's call. That's going to be tracking entity, tax, and licensing data, managing your corporate tax and licensing, maintaining registered agents, timely notification of key staff, reliable research process to track ongoing changes, updates on your CE requirements, automated timelines and filing alerts, and then defining your internal roles and processes. Every firm is unique. What we share here is a general in nature and based on our extensive experience working with organizations of all different sizes. We do encourage you to take these ideas back to your management teams and legal counsel in order to shape your overall compliance program. Many of you may be concerned about the complexity of managing licenses and business entity requirements and the ongoing drain of staff time. Compliance registrations and renewals are key areas that can be handled with trained internal staff or outsourced, for example, to a service provider. Harbor Compliance does offer a white glove setup. Will file on your behalf and maintain registrations and licenses for you. Remember, everyone plays a part internally and externally, starting with management. The key is to be proactive and review all of your rules and processes regularly. We've talked about the various complexities involving managing business compliance in a modern era. We've discussed the importance of a robust compliance program that encompasses internal processes and which ties to the organization's growth strategy. Use the information you've learned here and communicate it with your management team. Take some self-assessments, especially if you've been employing or hiring, selling, or operating across state lines. Gaps may emerge that simply cannot be met using existing processes or resources. As your business evolves faster and faster, it's increasingly important to be aligned with a vendor who can support your ever-changing needs across your enterprise. We've talked about how complex licensing requirements can be. Look at how firms can solve this challenge in practice. On the left, you can see the core issue, which is researching requirements. Across the US, we have 800 AEC licensing requirements, more than 1,500 different filings for those individuals and firm licenses. These vary state by state and jurisdiction. Traditionally, this means hours and hours of manual research, calling agencies, and trying to interpret state websites that weren't designed for multiple state firms. On the right side, we have a solution, our Compliance Navigator tool. This tool replaces that manual research process. Instead of digging through the agency websites state by state, you can find an input to your industry and jurisdiction and receive professional grade reports within minutes, covering licensing, permitting, entity registration, and tax obligations. The goal is simple: help your firm meet regulatory requirements faster and move forward with confidence instead of the guesswork. Once you understand those requirements, the next step is execution. That means preparing and filing applications, understanding prerequisites, and managing the process for firms, licensing qualifiers, and entity registration, all at the same time. This is where managing licensing services come in. Instead of handling each step manually, firms can simplify the entire process of researching, applying for, managing, and renewing their license through a centralized solution. Alongside that, having nationwide registered agent is critical. States require firms to maintain registered agent to receive legal and regulatory documents. This ensures nothing important is missed and supports your ability to stay in good standing wherever the company operates. Together, managed licensing and registered agent services creates a strong foundation for meeting regulatory requirements in every state. Next, one of the most sensitive parts of maintaining good standing is managing those qualifiers. Every firm needs to designate specific individuals as the qualifiers. The first step is knowing who those people can be and where the gaps exist. From there, firms should consider whether specialty trade qualifiers are required and ensure that qualifier information is always current with the licensing boards. Many states require changes to be reported in as little as 10 days. It's also important to plan for the unexpected. That means creating a contingency plan and identifying replacement qualifiers ahead of time, so you are not scrambling if someone leaves or becomes unavailable. Finally, firms need a system that tracks your qualifiers, continuing education, and triggers immediate tasks of qualifying departures. Without that visibility, it's easy for a single lapse to affect the firm's ability to operate. When the firms expand into those new states, the number of regulatory requirements increases quickly. There are five components of this challenge. First, business expansion itself adds administrative complexity across multiple agencies. Second, entity structure, naming requirements vary by state. What works in one state may be rejected in another state. Third, business ownership rules may require restructuring or even forming a new entity in certain jurisdictions. Fourth, we have tax registrations that must be completed separately and often involve multiple departments with long processing times. Finally, successful expansion requires a holistic approach, coordinating licenses, entity registration, tax accounts, and internal decision making. Is treating all and any of these steps in isolation increases the risk of delay, penalties, or a missed opportunity. Once you have the licenses, the work does not stop there. Each renewal cycle requires firms to research, update requirements, prepare documentation, and submit filings again. This can include changes to formation documents, financial statements, proof of firm qualifier licenses, continuing education, surety bonds, insurance certificates, and good standing certifications. Renewals are especially sensitive because requirements can change year to year. What worked last year may not work or be accepted this year. That's why renewal management should be treated as an ongoing process, not a once a year scramble. Firms that rely on manual tracking or spreadsheets often find out too late that something was missed, which can impact their ability to operate. The final challenge is keeping up with regulatory changes. Licensing requirements are not static, they evolve constantly across states, professions, and agencies. Firms need to track changes to entity data, licensing, tax, and corporate records at all time. This requires a system that does not just store information, but actively monitors and updates it. When a rule changes, that change has to be reflected in how your firm manages its licensing and filings. With a centralized source of truth, firms can adapt proactively, protect their good standing, and avoid surprises that disrupts operations. Harbor Compliance offers a one stop solution to many of the challenges we've heard during today's presentation. We've taken these strategies and defined what constitutes an ideal system and built a suite of services and software around it. We've built a cloud-based compliance software and continuously maintain a database of nationwide requirements. It keeps everyone within your organization up to date on your registration status in every state. It provides a secure, efficient, and effective way for your organization to maintain and assess essential compliance information. Of course, organizations that register in multiple states and have multiple entities gain additional value. Access to our software is available as part of our managed service or standalone SaaS. There are five purpose-built modules. We have license, entity tax, records manager, plus requirements research engine. So when we talk about needing a single place to manage registration data, records, and reporting deadlines, our software modules do just that. It provides your organization with valuable reporting insights needed to easily assess wherever your business is registered. We also uh, provide the support services to manage your compliance, which is registered agents, annual reports, license management, Secretary of State registrations, tax registrations, and managing DBAs and other compliance lifecycle filings. We offer a management system for AEC compliance experts at the level of support you desire, from an onboarding support to fully managed services. In closing, Harbor Compliance offers software and managed licenses, business lifecycle, and tax registration services across the United States. We are also a nationwide provider of registered agent service with local offices in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. We offer support as a comprehensive and basis as you require. Whether your firm needs assistance managing licenses to book new businesses, or to register or maintain entities, open tax accounts, or apply for business licenses, our dedicated account services team will support you. At this point, we do want to thank you for joining us today. We do want to offer you a free Compliance Navigator AI research tool there. On the bottom left, we have the Architecture and Engineering Compliance Navigator. On the right, you can scan the code for the Construction and Contracting Compliance Navigator tool. I will stay on for any questions. You can just drop them in the chat to me. If I do not answer them here, we do thank you again for joining us today and look forward to supporting you in the future.